You've probably heard some wild stories about the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, secret missions in places the government won't admit, unauthorized strikes that never made the news, phantom sorties flying non-stop from a Missouri base to anywhere on Earth. Some of these rumors sound like pure fiction, and honestly, most of them are. But separating fact from fiction when it comes to one of the most classified military aircraft ever built is actually pretty fascinating. If you're curious about what's real and what's just conspiracy theory, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the deep dives into military aviation and defense technology that actually hold up to scrutiny. Let's start with the most persistent myth: unauthorized combat missions. People love the idea that the B-2 has flown strikes that the Pentagon simply won't acknowledge. The reality is far more mundane and heavily documented than that. Every B-2 deployment is tracked through official military channels. Every flight hour is logged. Every combat mission, even the classified ones, exists in secure Department of Defense records that are accountable to Congress. The myth probably persists because the B-2 itself is so secretive that people assume its operations must be equally hidden. But there's actually a crucial difference between classified operations and secret operations. Classified means the details are restricted, but the fact that a mission happened is known to authorized personnel and recorded in official systems. Secret means it literally didn't happen in any official capacity. The B-2 has never flown unauthorized strikes. It's simply too expensive, too visible in satellite imagery, and too important to the strategic posture of the United States for anyone to risk that kind of insubordination. The second major myth involves the B-2's legendary range and endurance. People hear that the aircraft can fly non-stop from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri to virtually anywhere on Earth, and they assume this means it regularly does exactly that. The truth is more nuanced. Yes, the B-2 can fly missions that last up to 33 hours, with in-flight refueling. Yes, it can strike targets across the globe without landing. But that doesn't mean it routinely does this. Most B-2 missions involve forward deployment to bases in the Pacific or Europe, where the aircraft stages before conducting strikes. Flying non-stop from Missouri to, say, the Middle East is technically possible but operationally unusual. When the B-2 did fly those incredibly long sorties, they were documented and announced, like the strikes during the Kosovo campaign. The myth exaggerates this capability into something almost magical, but the actual operations follow logical military doctrine. You like efficiency and planning? Well, the military likes it too. Forward basing makes far more tactical sense than burning extra fuel and crew fatigue on ultra-long-range flights when you can position the aircraft closer to the target area. Now let's talk about deployment locations, because this is where the real intrigue lives. The B-2 operates from exactly 4 main bases: Whiteman in Missouri, Anderson in Guam, RAF Fairford in England, and occasionally others for temporary deployments. The myth suggests there are secret B-2 operating locations that the government won't acknowledge. Classified bases where these aircraft hide between missions. The problem with this theory is that you can't hide a B-2. These are some of the most observed aircraft in the world. Satellite imagery is constantly tracking military bases. Open-source intelligence communities actively monitor B-2 movements. The aircraft generates enormous heat signatures. It requires massive runways and specialized facilities. You simply cannot secretly base a B-2 anywhere without someone eventually noticing. What you can do is keep the specific details of certain deployments classified. When the B-2 deploys to Diego Garcia, a remote atoll in the Indian Ocean, the fact of the deployment is public, but the exact dates and mission details remain classified. That's not a secret base. That's a classified deployment. People often confuse the two, and that confusion feeds the mythology. Let's examine the myth about the B-2 flying unauthorized strikes in response to threats. The story usually goes something like this. A regional crisis erupts, and the B-2 launches a strike before official authorization comes through. The military takes action first, and gets permission later. This simply doesn't happen in reality. The B-2 is a strategic asset, and strategic assets follow chains of command that go all the way to the president. A B-2 pilot cannot launch a strike without explicit authorization from the Secretary of Defense and ultimately the Commander-in-Chief. The aircraft has kill switches built into its avionics. It has communication protocols that ensure constant contact with command authority. The myth persists because we've seen Hollywood movies where military officers bend the rules to do what they think is right. Real military operations don't work that way, especially not with a platform that costs over $2 billion. The institutional controls are simply too robust. Another persistent rumor claims that the B-2 has flown to locations that the United States doesn't officially acknowledge having military relationships with. Secret strikes on bases that don't exist in official diplomatic records. Here's what's actually true. The B-2 has flown to plenty of places around the world. And the United States has military relationships with far more countries than most people realize. Some of these relationships are classified. Some of these operations are compartmentalized. But the idea that the B-2 is flying secret strikes on secret bases is more fiction than fact. What usually happens is this. The B-2 flies to a location, conducts an operation, and either the operation is announced immediately or it remains classified. In classified cases, the fact that something happened is eventually declassified, sometimes years later. During the Balkans campaigns, we didn't announce every B-2 sortie in real time, but we knew they were happening. Eventually, that information became public. That's the actual pattern. Let's address the myth about the B-2 flying with minimal coordination with other branches of the military. The idea is that the Air Force keeps B-2 operations so classified that the Navy doesn't know about them, or the Army isn't informed. This creates this image of the B-2 as this rogue asset operating independently across the globe. The reality is completely different. B-2 operations are coordinated through the same unified command structure as every other military asset. If a B-2 is going to strike a target in Central Command's area of responsibility, Central Command is briefed. If carrier strike groups are operating in the same region, there's deconfliction. The compartmentalization of B-2 information is about security classification, not operational coordination. Everyone who needs to know does know. And like this video and share it with anyone who's ever wondered about the actual truth behind these classified weapon systems. Because the real story is genuinely interesting without needing the conspiracy layers. Here's a fascinating myth. The B-2 can fly from Missouri, strike a target on the opposite side of the world, and return to Missouri without ever landing anywhere else. While this is technically within the aircraft's design envelope, it's not how the aircraft is actually employed. Those marathon flights demand perfect weather, zero mechanical issues, multiple in-flight refuelings, and extraordinary crew endurance. Military planners don't risk multi-billion-dollar assets on those kinds of edge-case scenarios. Instead, they use forward bases, staging areas, and logical mission planning. The myth turns the B-2 into something almost superhuman, but the aircraft is ultimately bound by physics, maintenance requirements, and reasonable operational practices. The fact that it can fly those distances is impressive. The fact that it doesn't often do so is just smart strategy. There's also a persistent myth that the B-2 has engaged in secret warfare in regions where the United States officially claims to have no military presence. The aircraft supposedly operates independently, launching strikes without acknowledgement or coordination with host nations. Here's what actually happens in those situations. When the United States conducts military operations, there are complex diplomatic and legal frameworks at work. Sometimes those operations are publicly announced. Sometimes they're conducted under classified authorities but acknowledged to relevant oversight committees in Congress. Sometimes they're deeply classified. But the idea that the B-2 is a rogue actor completely outside these frameworks is false. The aircraft operates under explicit authorization. Its missions are tracked. Its capabilities are understood by military leadership. There's no secret B-2 war happening in the shadows, beyond all accountability. Let's talk about one more major myth. The idea that the B-2 has been deployed to bases or regions that don't actually exist in official military documentation. That there are ghost bases where the B-2 operates. The reality is that every military base is documented. Every runway capable of supporting the B-2 is known to intelligence agencies. The aircraft requires 10,000-foot runways, specialized hangars, and maintenance facilities. You can't just fly it to some hidden location and operate it from there. When the B-2 operates somewhere, someone knows about it. The information might be classified, but it exists in military records. The myth probably comes from the fact that some B-2 deployments are announced with a delay, or certain operational details remain classified for years. That's not a secret base. That's a classified timeline. Eventually, many of these details become public knowledge. Historians and researchers piece together the B-2's operational history from declassified documents and public reporting. The final major myth worth exploring is the idea that the B-2 has engaged in operations that violate international law or established rules of engagement, and the military has simply kept it quiet. The suggestion is that this aircraft is so classified and so powerful that it operates beyond normal legal and ethical constraints. This is fundamentally misunderstanding how the military operates. Rules of engagement for B-2 pilots are extremely detailed. Target validation is rigorous. Legal review happens before strikes are conducted. Does the military sometimes face criticism about specific operations? Absolutely. Have there been legitimate debates about targeting decisions? Yes. But the idea that the B-2 is out conducting some kind of shadow warfare beyond all legal frameworks is not supported by evidence. When controversies do arise about military operations involving B-2s, they're debated in Congress, in the courts, and in the media. That's democracy operating as designed, not a secret being hidden. So what's the actual reality of B-2 operations? The aircraft is real and incredibly capable. It has conducted major combat missions across multiple conflicts. It can indeed reach targets globally when properly supported with refueling tankers and logistics. Its deployment locations are a mixture of established bases and classified schedules rather than secret bases.